Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for your patience as a number of advisors I can actually see still are piling into the room. So we are going to kick off what is our fourth installment of the Advisor Advancement Mastermind Series. So really excited to be here today with a couple of my friends and colleagues here. My name is Matt Eilers. I'm the Chief Business Development Officer here at USA Financial. I'll be joined today by our Chief Marketing Officer, Mark Mersman, and our Chief Practice Management Officer, Steve Phillips, who some of you have seen in previous webinars that we've done. And what I'm really excited about for today is we're going to be getting into, you can see the title is, what the pandemic taught us about process and marketing and branding. And we got into the weeds on some of that in our very first installment of this webinar series. And we're going to be taking another look at that today with a little bit of a spin and looking at it through the lens of marketing. So you're probably wondering, why do we pick these topics and what is it that exactly that we're looking to do? Well, we're going to get into that, and it has to do with this group that you see up on the screen in front of you. So the lay of the land today is we're going to run about 45 minutes, and we're going to pack in a lot of stuff between now and then. We're not going to be able to take live questions, very likely. We've tried to do it in the past and never had time to do it, so I'm assuming we're going to be similar today. But what you will see at the bottom of your screen is there is a Q&A icon. If you have a question, please put it in there. I will promise to try and take questions at the end if time permits. Otherwise, we will reach out to you and we will touch base and make sure we can get your questions answered. Also, please be sure to stick around to the end. What I can tell you all, for those of you that haven't joined us in one of these events yet, is you're probably wondering, when is the big sales pitch coming? And the good news is there isn't one. The big pitch is, for those of you that like what you see today, you're going to get a chance to talk one-on-one with either Mark or Steve. So that's the big pitch. And that's something that if you want to take us up on that, we're happy to do for you. So stick around to the end. We're going to talk about how you can take advantage of that if what you hear today resonates. And what you see here on this screen says beginning with the end in mind. And I think it's a really good place to start here, because I mentioned earlier, why do we select the topics for these webinars? And when we started this series and we started planning for this series back in December, we were looking at what happened in 2020 for advisors that we work with. And so we started digging into, once the year closed out, we started digging into the numbers, and we really wanted to see, because we had our hunches and we knew what they were doing, but we wanted to see how things panned out. So before, with all these numbers that you see in front of you, before I jump into that, the statement I'll make is, if I was to stand here and say, you know what, at USA Financial in 2020, our advisors averaged 5.2% growth of their revenue, you'd probably be like, who is this guy and what is he talking about, right? Prove it. Or even if I said over 3 years, they averaged 184% growth, those are just numbers that are really hard to digest sometimes, especially knowing the year that we just came out of, being 2020. So here's my ability to try and prove it. And this is what you're seeing in front of you is the top 40 advisors at USA Financial. And we showed you the revenue. This is their revenue to them. So if there are multiple advisors in a firm, that you're going to add some of those together. But at the end of the day, what you can see is everyone that's got that dark green highlight grew their business in 2020. And better yet, you look at some of the 3-year growth. Now, this is revenue. This is their revenue to them, revenue that they're generating from AUM, from commissionable securities, from annuity assets, insurance. You can see the growth rates here. And what we know about 2020, looking at this group of advisors, we know some things. We know that everything was turned upside down in an instant, right? The way that we interacted with our clients was changed forever. The way that we were acquiring new clients changed forever. We're going to be talking about some of that stuff today. And what we saw, and it's hard to believe we're in 2021, right? I say 2020, I feel like sometimes we're still in it, especially here in Michigan. But what we saw in 2020 was there was really two main reactions for advisors out there. And reaction number one was, this is only going to be 2 weeks. We're going to hunker down and we're going to ride it out, right? We've got a big book of business. We can get through this. But then 2 weeks turned into 4 weeks, and 4 weeks turned into 3 months. And then it just kept going and kept going. And we know many advisors got lost in that chaos. The other reaction we saw was immediately advisors embracing all of what we consider our new opportunities. There was a lot of new opportunities in 2020 that we can continue to leverage even now into the futures of our businesses. And this is a lot of it was technology related, right? I mean, look at what we're doing here today. How many of these did you ever attend pre-2020? And how many Zoom meetings or Teams meetings or have you been on since you all know the drill? You know how to do this. Most of your clients do too. So there's a lot of embracing some of this stuff that allowed advisors to continue to enhance the client experience and continue to receive introductions and be extremely referable, which I know Steve and Mark are going to talk a lot about today. What we saw out there, though, was the problem was not that advisors weren't trying. For advisors that didn't experience the growth that you see on the screen here, advisors that we talked to that didn't have a great 2020, it wasn't because they weren't trying. What we have learned is that they weren't getting the right support. They weren't headed down the right direction, and they didn't have, in some instances, the right partner to arm them with tools and systems and processes and technology and all these things that they really deserved and that would have been super helpful for them. So today, as we get into branding and process and marketing, we picked the topic because when you look at this leaderboard here of our advisors, this is the stuff that they were focused on in 2020. This is what amounted to them being able to have a year of growth in what felt like a year of being punched in the face for so many people. So without further ado, I want to get out of the way for my friends, Mark and Steve. You see the word enthusiasm here. I'll let Mark talk about that in a moment, but I think that's a pretty darn good word to describe Mark and his enthusiasm for marketing. Some would say he puts the Mark in marketing. And then Steve with practice management, he puts the Steve in practice management.
Wow.
So
I've not
without further ado, boys, take it away. And let's talk about what happened last year. What did we learn?
Yeah, well, so we are going to, like you said, we're going to take a look at this through the lens of marketing and branding. I'm excited to have this conversation. And you did mention the word enthusiasm. Never has this word held more meaning than right now, as you think about the fact that we have been stuck in this fog, after a year of dealing with the global pandemic. And for many of you, everything about your business got turned upside down a year ago. The way you communicate, the way you market, the way you handle business operations daily, it all changed. And it is easy to fall into a funk. It's easy to lose that enthusiasm after we've all been through that past 12 months. But here's the reality. We can't afford to. Our clients and our prospective clients need us now more than ever. And we have to embrace that change. And we have to really become enthused about what it can mean, what that change can really mean to your practice. And that's a lot of what we wanted to start with, because if you think about some of the changes that COVID-19 ushered into your business, into your marketing, that we're starting to see a bunch of different trends. And we're going to try to highlight these trends as we go through today's presentation. But obviously, when that lockdown first started, we all know that, I have to figure out, and I better focus on loving my clients and figuring out how do I get them to introduce me to other people. And so we will certainly discuss that. And that's going to be a big part of the discussion that we have with Steve today. As Matt kind of alluded to, we all of a sudden made a big shift to webinars. And many of you, I know, if you were doing live events, you made some shifts and some transitions, and you obviously got real familiar with the likes of Zoom. So that was a big change, and certainly something that was triggered by the pandemic. Virtual meetings, obviously these remote style meetings, and many of you, I know we've talked to a lot of the advisors with whom we work, and they're so enthused about the fact that now they can essentially take their practice wherever they want through the use of these virtual meetings, and they've trained their clients in such a way that will accommodate that. All of a sudden, we on the marketing side, our team works with a number of different third-party lead vendors that essentially generate leads on the internet. And in talking with them, their activity, there was just a flood of activity that came their way. And everybody started to get in line, or a lot of advisors started to get in line because their other forms of marketing essentially changed. So we're certainly going to factor that into the conversation today as you think about if that's a part of your practice today, how is it that you should best leverage that, and what can you do to improve your efforts there? Podcasts. A lot of advisors shifted to podcasts or added that as a part of their marketing equation. And the same thing with video blogs. You saw this shift all of a sudden of focus towards things that we can do while we're not in the office, or different ways that we can begin to get our messaging out to all of our clients and our prospective clients. So that was a big part. That was a huge change going through the pandemic. But there's one thing that the pandemic did not change. And I will contend that the pandemic actually simply exacerbated this even further. And Steve, I want to hand it off to you here to talk about this, because I know that this is something that you have driven home for years about. Yeah. What is the number one reason that clients fire their advisors?
Yeah, and thanks, Mark. It's great to be on with you. It's been a while. I love the fact that you teed this up with the word enthusiasm, and I'm going to reference that a few times. And honestly, it didn't really sink in. I mean, obviously enthusiasm is important, especially in branding and marketing and what we do for our advisors. But I don't think it really clicked with me fully until just a couple of minutes ago, as I'm hearing you walk through it. And here's the thing about enthusiasm. When you think of 2020, I think the entire nation, we just weren't enthusiastic about anything. The enthusiasm was just not just our business, but life in general. I mean, you think about everything that we went through. The other thing that clicked when you were talking, Mark, is what do we say about enthusiasm? It's contagious. So as an advisor, if you're not enthusiastic about what you're doing, you're not enthusiastic about your marketing initiatives, it's not going to be communicated. And something that list that you just put together, whether it's a podcast, it's a virtual event, we're going to get back in front of people in live seminars. If we're just sort of going through the motions and not enthusiastic, it's really, the translation is going to be lost there in the opportunity.
And it was difficult for a lot of advisors to make that shift, and if they did live events, and to bring that enthusiasm onto a webinar or something to that effect. That's a hard transition.
Yeah, it was, and it's understandable. And it's funny now that a year on, how many advisors are super enthusiastic about it, that are going to continue to build it into what they're doing. The point you make about what causes clients to go, I've had enough of this relationship. So there was a study that was done by Advisor IQ in May. They wrote an article in May of 2020. Advisors concerned, they're worried about clients letting them go. They're worried about the inability to communicate with clients. And I'm thinking to myself when I was reading this, what's going on here? Who's dropping the ball? And it would appear, with everything that we went through in 2020 and the lack of enthusiasm and maybe some things that we were experiencing for the first time, that there's a lack of communication there, and it began to make sense. But then I thought, we've heard this, as you mentioned, for years as we've done practice management. And so I went back to 2013. So the pandemic is one thing, what happened with the market early on and it rebounded, but then what happened to life in general and what people were going through. I went back to 2013, found an old article that I used to tote around the country with me to talk to advisors about. And it was done by Riskalyze. And 2013, for those of you that don't remember, was a big market year. Up, things were great, things were positive. And yet Riskalyze found that an inordinate amount of clients were dropping advisors, firing their advisor. And when we dug into that, the number one reason, and if you're interested in that article or a conversation about that, I'm happy to have that. It's really interesting. The number one reason was a failure to communicate at all. My advisor just didn't reach out to me. So as we started diving in with clients, as we've done our consulting work with USA Financial and prior to that, and speaking to the end user, we started to ask the question, what do you feel like is going on? Some of the communications were still being had, but we've had a lot of clients tell us, my advisor just doesn't talk to me like a person. And I get that my advisor is skilled and maybe smarter than me. I expect her to be smarter than me. And we're talking about money and the future and all that kind of thing. But there just is something missing there. And then we went back to the advisor. And what we found was, I don't think any advisor said, you know what, I'm just not going to communicate. I don't want to anymore. But I think what happened, Mark, was advisors ran out of things to talk about that were compelling. And all of us, it's hard to pick up the phone. It's hard to get in person and go, what are we going to talk about together? There's only one birthday a year for your clients. Maybe there's one or two strategy and tactical meetings. But what happens is advisors ran out of things to say, and it really got illuminated in the pandemic. Yeah. So something that we found out was, there really is a human nature component. And this really became a factor last year. The advisors that we worked with, Mark, and I know that you guys were a part of this on your team, I think that we don't know what to talk about came by going through the book. 2020 doesn't exist in history anywhere. This wasn't 08, 09, big market crash. We've got some history there. This was people losing jobs, people sick, family members confined, people dying. It was a big deal. So it sort of made sense that we ran out of things to say. So in our consulting work, we said, wait a minute. What if you spoke to your clients like you were going through the same thing? What if the conversation around family, you were talking about your homeschooling your kids, that you had a parent that was sick that you couldn't go visit? What about occupation? There were people that we know that were furloughed and laid off and jobs were lost. What if you were communicating some of those same things? What we found out instantly that clients really gravitated to that. And what Matt was referring to, Mark, was our advisors, many of them, as you know, had their biggest years last year when it came to introductions, which turned instantly into new business. Wonder why that is. Well, the human nature component is, hey, I can communicate now with my guy, Mark, my advisor. He's like me. And I really like the fact that he sort of crossed that barrier and acts like he knows what's going on in my life. So the point that we make here is the human nature component was alive and well in 13 when Riskalyze did their study and some advisors missed it. It's alive and well in 2021 and going forward. And part of the branding and marketing that Mark's team and that we do together is how do we make sure that we always take into account the human nature component so your clients feel compelled not only to be a part of the relationship, but to turn around and share it.
Steve, I'll tell you, I think one of the things, and we can all relate to this, and that was one of the things about the pandemic that was kind of cool because it was one of those things that we could all come rally around and say, yeah, this lockdown, this is tough. This is, you really do run out of things to do when you're home for 4 weeks and you're in the house with the family every single day. And I will say, there's an old saying in marketing that content is king. And I would certainly agree with that. I think content is king. And that's a little bit of kind of what you're alluding to is helping to define some of the content that you're going to communicate. But there's, if content is king, then engagement is queen. And the reality, we got to think about that. And we have to engage both with our clients and with our prospective clients. And we have to engage in a manner that makes them feel like you've alluded to, like it is, you are a human being as well. And it's not this sales presentation. So I think, how you communicate is so critical with the introductions that I know we're going to touch on, but it's also the number one aspect of determining your success with new client marketing is going to be how you communicate and what it is that you're talking about. Are you touching on the right things?
Yeah. And I'll tell you this too, Mark, as we move on, that I think that branding and communication is what marketing is about. And the collaboration that we have with Advisor Protocol becoming part of the USA family a couple of years ago there was really, I don't want to overuse the word synergy, but we think alike, that helping advisors make that jump with a brand and getting enthused about getting out in front of clients again, getting enthused about virtual events, getting enthused about making a phone call and having a real life conversation. So here's another take on the word enthusiasm. And I know you and I are both big fans of Simon Sinek. And
oh yeah.
So listen, if we said what generates enthusiasm, And I think when Matt was talking about you and he was talking about me, it's because we both believe in what we do. Now think of that. You can't be enthusiastic about something that you don't believe in. And certainly if you can fake the enthusiasm one or two times, it's not ongoing. The thing about, and this, the thing I love about what we do is communication with end clients. And the Simon Sinek quote here, if you talk about what you believe, what your foundations are, why you're doing what you're doing, your clients pick up on that. That generates enthusiasm. And clients have told us all along, I know when my guy's kind of not into it, or that's a little bit of BS. But if I'm talking about my process, and that's what you see here on the screen, we help advisors name their process, take everything that you can do over the life of a relationship with a client and boil it down to something that they can put a handle on and pick it up and internalize it, and then turn around and share it with other people. And in fact, isn't that really the baseline of marketing? How do we reach people and what are they left with? It's kind of what resonates. What do they remember? What moves them to action? Action might first be doing business together. A bigger piece of action after that is, do I share it? You're enthused about it. You believe in it. You've made it easy for me to understand, Mark. And now marketing really becomes an effective measure for building a practice.
Here's the thing with this, Steve. When you first introduced this to our team and shared it with our team, I thought it was one of the most impactful things that I had seen when it comes to communication, branding, and marketing for financial advisors. And I don't just say that to say it. The primary reason is what we do in the financial planning profession is so intangible.
Yeah.
It is so, like, there isn't a product for somebody to get excited about or touch and use. And it is so intangible what we do, that this starts to bring that tangibility both for the advisor themselves, because there's something that they can latch onto, but more importantly for their clients and prospective clients, that they can start to feel like, wow, I'm a part of something. If you're familiar with the book, The Experience Economy, this concept should resonate. There is a progression of economic value for consumers. And it starts with commodities, and then next up that ladder is the goods. And you could argue that in our business, we certainly have certain things, products and that sort of thing, that are commoditized. You can argue that we have some goods that we offer. As you progress up that economic ladder, you have services that come next. Mm-hmm. And the advisors there's a lot of you that have done a very good job of packaging up some of the goods that you have into a service and an offering. And then that next level there is experience. And what's really cool about doing this and naming your process and defining your process is it now starts to be something that you're brought into that experience realm, which is something very few advisors achieve. And I think it has just a tremendous impact on your marketing. And so when we look at that, you look at the fact that we have introductions, this process needs to be woven into that discussion with introductions to prospective clients. It needs to be woven into, if you're purchasing leads, regardless of from whatever source it might be, this will start to create some tangibility and differentiate you from, if you're purchasing leads, there's a good chance that 2 or 3 other advisors are purchasing that exact same lead. How do you differentiate yourself from those others? And this is the sort of thing that starts to get you there. Same thing with webinars. If you can start to articulate your process, you have a huge advantage over what others are doing. And Steve, I guess as we kind of shift here, I want to talk a little about how we communicate that, and how is it that we start to communicate all of this process and what it is that we do in a simplified way.
Yeah, and thanks, Mark. And this is sort of a tangible way to communicate the experience. But before we talk about this, I want to go back to the experience thing again. I mean, think everything in life. This is what we found about introductions. And the word enthusiasm really struck me when we started, and now the word experience. And I've been through both of those things with you. Think about why people talk about things. And forget financial services. People love something in their life. They go to this same restaurant. They have this great bottle of wine. They saw this amazing series on Netflix. I still can't get over The Queen's Gambit. It's like the coolest show I think. It's just phenomenal. What is it that causes people to say, Mark, you guys got to watch The Queen's Gambit, or you've got to get to it? It's the experience they've had. And this, it almost seems too fundamentally simple, but it is this simple. When we connect experience back to what resonates with clients and helping them communicate that, it just becomes one more thing that I'm like, my experience with my advisor, number one, is different. Number two, it's amazing. Number three, I know how to describe it. All those things I mentioned, whatever the example is, a bottle of wine, the show on Netflix, or the restaurant, I know how to describe it. And so what you've brought up here, Mark, is one of the ways that we help our advisors with a tangible piece put down in front of their clients, the process. And how do we communicate this? And I'll take this back to the human nature component. There are three things. And again, for those of you that participated with us in January, we went through this really in depth. And if you missed us in January, you'll be able to get a hold of Mark or me or any of the support people, the sales team at USA, and we'll walk you through it. But the three quick things on here. Now, we mentioned earlier about boiling down everything as an advisor that you can do for a client over the life of a relationship. And believe me, in our experience, it's a lot. If you added up everything, it's in the 50s, 60s, 70s. We have some advisors that say I could do more than 100 things over the life of a relationship. And the obvious question is, number one, what are your clients? How many of those things do they care about? Number two, how many can they remember? Well, the idea of breaking down, just really quickly, maybe the 100 things down into 7 foundational pillars. That you focus on wealth management. That's how you come by most of your relationships. But you also provide risk management and tax planning, and so it goes. We call that the 7 pillars. But ultimately, they lead to the one compelling process. You don't have to remember even 7 things. We want to make this simple. Everything that can happen, most of the things that can happen in your financial life are accounted for in our process. When they become relevant, we've got it in hand. Then we got to this human nature component that I spoke of that happened so much in 2020. Our advisors have been doing this presentation for a number of years, but it really went off the hook last year. If you could sit down with clients, but you couldn't, but you could get on a virtual meeting and share with them, you know what our foundational approach is? We focus on what matters most to our clients and the things that we can control. Now, while those are always relevant, think about how relevant those 2 things were last year. Underneath what matters most to our clients are issues around family, occupation, and recreation. Well, it's not enough just to say that's what matters most to you. We know that family is important. We know that maybe work optional lifestyle or that retirement date on the calendar, that's important. Wasn't enough. This is where the human nature component comes in. And we had advisors volunteering. Here's what's going on in our life. My mother's been confined, haven't seen her for 6 months. Boy, the homeschooling thing with the kids is getting crazy, isn't it? That's a human nature component. My family, your family. I know that we've been working together. Mark, you're going to have this work optional lifestyle that what you want to achieve in the next 5 years. That might be pushed back a little bit. I know we've been talking about pay reductions and that family members have lost jobs. That's a human nature component. We never lose sight of that stuff. And so we can go through that presentation in detail, but this, Matt said earlier, you want to prove it? Here's what got numbers moving for USA Advisors.
Yeah, no doubt.
Clients responded to it. How about what matters followed by what we can control? What do you think the biggest thing last year that we couldn't control? How about COVID itself? And here's the thing about that, Mark. COVID is starting to, I think a lot of us feel like we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're sort of headed that way. We know that at some point in the future, it will be in the rearview mirror. The point we made to advisors, don't run out of things to say, communicate in a compelling way, is when COVID is done, your clients are going to say, there's something else I feel that's out of my control. It's what bugs me the most. There's always something out of my control. So we focus on what we can control, and there they are. a philosophy, an enlightened philosophy around everything financial, wealth management, risk management, all the pieces that matter to you. Our planning strategy. Listen, life goes like this. It doesn't. It goes like this and it comes back and it goes across. So does our planning strategy. Fluid, dynamic, just like your life. And then we mentioned our proprietary process. Don't worry about all the details. Compelling communication, everything that can happen is accounted for in our proprietary process. So those three things, and listen, the other thing too, Mark, is that we know that all the branding work that your team does, when you put a piece down, I think clients are shocked. They'll be like, where's the numbers? Where's all the data? Where's the jargon, man? This thing is too good looking. This is too amazing to be a financial services piece, but it is.
Right.
And so the whole idea of marketing, creating professional contrast, talk about being enthusiastic about presenting this.
You know, the nice thing about this is that when you think about how this transfers into the marketing impact, I can't tell you how many times that our team will have consultations regarding websites and, you know, boy, what should I have? What should I include on my website? And this right here, what you see in front of you, is the perfect framework to get started for what you're going to communicate and how you communicate on your website. I mean, it's right there and it's very memorable. There's an image that obviously our team works with you on and starts to imprint on people. And I think it's extremely valuable here because now we can start to really communicate the why and the how and the what. And we'll touch on that in a minute. Same thing as we go with webinars. I mean, if you're not talking about that intersection of matters in control in your webinars and in your individual meetings, and then you're missing the boat. And I'll contend, I mean, you touched a lot on, Steve, the conversations through COVID and the family, the occupation, the recreation. The thing that I love about that is we all went through that experience and we'll never forget that. I mean, that is a time in our lives. And in the event that you shared that with your clients and had conversations, and perhaps, you know, everybody was so thirsty for recreation during that stretch and interaction and engagement. And if you did something to help create or improve that experience that those clients had during that, whether it was a fun Zoom event that you did, just constantly be thinking about what it is that you can do to help improve that experience. And it all is going to come back down to that family, that occupation, and recreation. So think about that as you go through your meetings and start to integrate this sort of thing into your practice. And this is just kind of a zoomed in piece or view of that why and that how. And for those of you that are familiar with the name Simon Sinek, I know we had a quote up earlier, but he did a TED Talks. It was probably 10, 15 years ago at this point. And it was all around the concept of the golden circle. And if you're interested in finding it, you can Google how great leaders inspire action. That was, I think, the initial name to his talk. But it was really all about how we communicate. And how is it that great leaders, what do they do? How do they communicate differently than the rest? And really, they start with why. They start with what it is that is so important to them that has driven them to do what it is that they do. They start with that versus if you think about your website, are you starting with what? You know, I am a financial advisor, or we are a financial planning firm. Are you communicating what first? Because his whole concept and the idea here was that what you need to emphasize is not the what. That's going to be the result. That's the end of it all. It's really all about why. Yeah. And I as I look at this, and this is one of the things that the whole idea of naming your formula and starting to name your services, what it really helps with. But as I look at this, there's another level that you can take this to, because this is not just about you. This is about your clients. And I want you to think about this. I want you to think about the fact that your clients want a certain result. Right? They want, and that might be, let's call it, they want a successful retirement. And if you think about how you market to your clients, that's usually how you're presenting it. Do you want a successful retirement? We'll help you get a successful retirement. But are we doing it wrong? Because the successful retirement is the result. Their purpose is found, your client's purpose is found in their family, in their occupation, in the things that they do with their time, their recreation. The how, the process for how we get and connect that purpose to the result is really the money. That's just that tangible thing that connects the purpose and the result. And sure, we're going to factor that in. That's going to be a part of our process. But if you start to think about this with your clients in mind, if you can help them find purpose in their lives, you're not selling. When you do the work that you do, when you consult your clients, you're not trying to present to them the result. You're trying to present to them and help them find purpose. For those of you that do podcasts or video blogs, I want you to think about integrating this idea into an interview. So imagine that you interview your clients and prospective clients or centers of influence, and rather than doing your traditional interview, take the form approach. Take the approach of zeroing in on their family, their occupation, their recreation, because one of those three things, I can assure you, is going to make that person really interesting. Whether it's their family, they have a family member that's doing something really unique, or whether it's their business that they own and their occupation that's really cool that you could feature. Whether it's somebody that is an 80-year-old who goes skydiving in their spare time. That's interesting. And that's the human nature component. And now you don't have to worry about coming up with episodes that are financial intensive, because you'll get there. You certainly can have a discussion about the end result that they're looking for. So keep that in mind as you think about integrating some of this.
Mark, let me, before you, I don't want to mess you up if you go back to that for a second, but that's such a great slide, because here's the thing too. I think you and I agree. One of the things that your team does so well that we do on the consulting side is helping, and this is what marketing is about, isn't it? Creating professional contrast. We had to look and feel different. Is there anything, if you were to lead with the what, successful retirement, help you achieve your goals. I don't hate it, but isn't that the least moment of professional contrast in our industry?
Right.
I mean, the professional contrast exists in the personal conversation about why and your purpose. And so I just wanted to touch on that. And I think the idea of those interviews, let's talk about why, and creating that, talk about purpose, the professional contrast, and then getting clients there, and whether it's websites, podcasts, everything that you mentioned.
And I just love the idea of interviewing your clients as a part of that process. And if you keep the conversation away from money, then you also avoid a lot of compliance concerns that can come with it. And, as we think about what client to talk about, you really need to be talking about your ideal client. That's who you should be interviewing. And you really need to define that.
Yeah.
I can't think of something more important in a practice than to go through and define your ideal client.
Thanks for saying that. And here's the thing. So one of the questions then, and we've had this conversation, is who are we marketing to? All about prospects. I think client acquisition never goes out of style. We're constantly bringing on new clients, but really, and we call this the law of familiarity. It's what happens with best clients is we're really not communicating. We've not identified them as how special they are, and defining them not by investable assets. This is another very, very meaningful piece that we put together for our advisors. And, one of the things we learned, again, talking with end users, clients, was I'm not going to go out and talk about you, Mark, in terms of investable assets and money. Right. If your minimum level is 250,000 of investable assets, there's nothing more uncomfortable for me than to ask my friends about money. But what's true? I do hang out with other people that are really like me. They're gracious, they're respectful, they have, they're grateful for today, aspiration for tomorrow. Well, what we found out was, first of all, how meaningful is it to honor, I don't know a better word, I don't know a different word, your very best clients, your advocates, with saying, this is what makes up an ideal client. And it's not, thank you for, of course, the investable assets off to the side, though. What we really honor is the type of person you are. And here's the thing. If you're an advisor, think about this. Are your very best clients oftentimes philosophically and attitudinally a lot like you?
Right. Absolutely.
And the human nature component there, Mark, is we all hang out with people that are like us in those ways. So we found a real opportunity to say, look, we want to honor our ideal clients. We want to name you. Here's what makes you so. I've been some of these live events, and I know we're doing them virtual and having success, where our clients will read about themselves in this brochure and start to read all those things that you have in the box and do this. Oh, yeah.
Right.
I'm awesome. Just like you said, Mark, look at me. I'm so cool. But I hang around with other people that are just like me. If you've named me as an ideal client, I hang around with people that are like me.
And I think it's critical that from a marketing standpoint, you are factoring this in on your website. Don't be scared to put that out there and let people know this is who we serve. This is who we can best impact. Same thing if you're buying leads from places, do your best not to purchase leads outside of what fits your ideal client. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see that happen, and I scratch my head when they have a list full of clients that don't fit their ideal client profile. So think about that. And the last piece here, the last bullet point is referrals versus introductions. You alluded to it, Steve. I want you to touch on this real quick because I think so many advisors have a very difficult time with asking for an introduction. So how would you encourage an advisor to think about that?
Well, if we said marketing, human nature component again, maybe what we do is to create experience for sure. You mentioned that, but to provide a service, a tangible service, and something that moves me to action. And so referrals, I say nice things about you. I hand out your card, but I don't insert myself in the process. Introduction, I can introduce Queen's Gambit to you and tell you exactly what you have to watch for. I can introduce you to this great bottle of wine and have it with the fish and do the thing and go to the new restaurant and ask for Jim, the waiter, whatever it might be. I just refer you. Introductions positioned as a service to our best clients. And there's and we talked about this in the January webinar, so I won't get into it deeply, but there's a method to this. By saying to clients, literally, if you have friends or family members, people important to you, they are important to us. If we could give them a sense of peace and calm about the future, we're happy to do that as a service to you. That's where introductions, and I think this was the piece, and this was the presentation that really elicited the most action, for lack of a better word, in 2020. Clients going, my advisor's talking to me in a compelling way. I need to make an introduction.
It created that tangibility. It created that conversation and engagement, which we've talked about is so important. And you touch on it as a service. I would contend that it's even a step above a service. It's a part of your experience. It's a part of the client experience. And speaking of experiences, when you think about many of you I know do live events, whether you do seminar marketing or workshop marketing. I just wanted to share with you some tips for live event marketing as we're getting nearing to the end here. I want to share this with you because we at USA Financial have a seminar program called Fill the Room. It's actually, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary of that system this year. And we're starting to see some of those events take place as some of the country comes back online, but it is really geography specific. So be very conscious of where you're doing it, where in the country you are. Certain parts of the country are certainly better than others. Facility choice is critical. You have to make sure that you can accommodate the distancing that you're going to need, that a facility is going to work with you. Obviously, it's a whole new world now, and having that flexibility of that facility is going to be critical. Emphasize on that marketing piece, your health safety protocols. It's kind of where we're at. It's the world we're living in. Anticipate about 10 to 30% lighter RSVP numbers than pre-pandemic. That's roughly what we're starting to see, depending on where in the country you're at. And the good news is that people expect and in many ways appreciate smaller group sizes right now. So, a little bit smaller events are not necessarily a bad thing. So before we hand this off back to Matt, there are some key takeaways that I just want to share. I know a lot of us attend these webinars and then think, oh, well, that was nice. And then you jump back into working in your business. I would encourage you, think about naming everything, define your process, humanize your conversations. Take a minute and define who you serve, who is your ideal client, formalize an introduction process. These are all things, obviously, that that we can help you with, and incorporate all of that into every aspect of your marketing, your website, your podcast, any of your social pages. Incorporate that into your conversation. It will become second nature to you, and engage the help of others. And I think that's really the opportunity here today is if you want to take a step and have a conversation with us, both Steve and I would be happy to do it. And Steve, it's been great chatting. And we're going to hand it back over to Matt to kind of take us home here. So just hang with us for just a moment, and we'll wrap this up.
Awesome. Thanks, fellas. That was great as always. And one of the things that I think is a really good point to jump into this slide here that I loved is how you were talking about defining that ideal client and really kind of knowing who that is. And we tend to practice what we preach here at USA Financial. We tell you to do that with your clients and your prospects. We do the same thing. And I know a lot of you are probably wondering right now, who the heck are these guys? What do they do? Who do they work with? I'm going to answer those questions for you. And really, to answer this question, I have a question for you. And the question is this you? Are you an advisor that's out there successfully gathering 7 to 10 million of new assets a year? And then when I say that, this is assets across the board. This is annuity assets. This is AUM. This is commissionable securities. Do you embrace all of those things in your planning? AUM and annuities. Are you using all these tools in a financial plan? Do you find that perhaps you've hit a plateau? Or the other side of it, maybe you've been growing so abruptly, so quickly, you're pressing that panic button because you're not quite sure where to go next. Things could get ugly quick because it's almost getting out of control, right? And are you someone that's looking for repeatable systems and processes and more introductions like we talk about, which now we know is different than a referral, and a business that's going to support your lifestyle, not the other way around, and more time, which is something that we know we can't purchase. If you hear these things, if this sounds like you, what you need to know is, the advisors whose names are blacked out here on the left, this is them. This is who they were when they were introduced to USA Financial. These were the challenges that they were facing, or these were some of the defining characteristics that made them ideal clients for us. Because if this sounds like you, we do need to talk. You need to take us up on just having another conversation. You owe it to yourself and you owe it to your business to chat with Mark or to chat with Steve, to chat with myself or someone from the team. And I know at this point, you're probably wondering, okay, well, seriously, what do you guys do? Are you an FMO? Are you a BD? Are you a TAMP, an RIA, a marketing company, a coaching company? The answer is yes. We are all of those things. And as you can see here, this is just kind of a brief overview of all of the entities and the companies under the USA Financial umbrella. Yes, we have an FMO. We have the broker dealer. We've got the multiple RIAs, the TAMP, the third-party money manager. We've got the coaching firm, the in-house marketing agency. Mark and Steve head up that coaching firm and that marketing agency. We've got the tech division of our company. It's not the point of the fact that we have all these companies under the roof. It's what having all of these under one roof does for the advisors, the environment it creates for them to actually grow their business. Because we don't, at the end of the day, as we are paid as wholesalers, there's no secret there. We don't have to act like one. Every time you call your FMO, they're going to, their answer is to write another annuity. Every time you call your BD, they want you to sell this VA or this mutual fund, the TAMP, so on and so forth. You'll never find a TAMP that's going to help you write more FIAs. You're not going to find a BD that's going to help you write more life insurance. You're not going to find an FMO that's going to help you gather more assets. We like to just take all those things and throw them out the window. We can focus on one thing, and that's helping you gather assets. Let's get our arms around 100% of what the clients have on the table and onboard and engage with new families, and do it by leveraging some of the things that Mark and Steve talked about. Formula, process. It's not about products, pricing, and performance. That's not why people engage with you, and that's not why they stay. It's about the things that Mark and Steve were talking about. So we like to focus on those things. We like to help advisors take a step out of working, in the business so much to work on their business and work on stuff like this, practice management and marketing and branding and process, all these things. So Mark, jump to the next slide. Thank you. You're probably thinking also, well, you've got all these entities, you got, all these divisions, and you've been in business. I didn't tell you, but we've been in business since 1988. There's got to be thousands of advisors there. How the heck are you able to help people? How could I possibly fit in if this is you? And the answer is we don't have thousands of advisors, and it's completely by design. You can see here, this is just an image that really tells the story of who we are and what we decided to do and how we partner with our advisors. You can see the red line is the count of advisors going back in history. The blue line is USA Financial's revenue. And what I want you to think of that as is that's the advisor's revenue, because that line is nothing but a direct reflection of the advisors that we align and partner with. You can see in 2004, we made a pivotal decision in the entire history of the company, and this really paved the way for the future of USA. At that point in time, we were working with 3,700 roughly, I'll call it agents and advisors. And it's at that point we realized that we were able and we needed to define our ideal client and go all in with them. So it was no longer working with, someone that maybe is just insurance only or is just focused on, one line of business or isn't fully licensed or, all these things. We define who are we best suited for and who can we help the most. And that, when I asked if this is you, all those things, that's kind of the group we whittled it down to. And that was, roughly just over 200 offices across the country. And you can see that red line, what that's done since, and you can see the blue line. We haven't been, it's not about how big we could get in number of offices. It's how small we could stay while helping them actually grow their business, which has been really fun. So what I want to offer up, and what Mark and Steve have been so generous to any of you that want to just continue the discussion with us. Good news is I told you there's no big scary sales pitch. If you want to talk to Mark or Steve, they're going to give you some time. And guess what? You don't have to say, I'm going to join your firm to do it. This isn't a recruiting call. They're going to give you some free consulting. If you want to audit your marketing, some of your branding and things that are coming up, maybe on the seminar front or advertising, some things of that nature, talk to Mark. As you can tell, he's a pretty big marketing geek. He knows his stuff. He's been doing this a long time. He can help you. He can let you know what, some of these advisors that grew their business last year, what they did, what they're doing, what their plans are now. Same goes with Steve. I don't think I've met a bigger practice management junkie in my time. And this guy knows his stuff as well. And these two have been engulfed in all of the things that have helped these advisors stay afloat and grow in 2020. So, we'd love for you to take them up on the offer for an audit or a consult or just a discussion about what all this means to you and what it means to your business. What I want to do here is have y'all write something down real quick. Save the date as we're wrapping up. Wednesday, May 26th, we're going to have our next event. This is going to be a special one because we are actually going to interview an advisor who joined USA Financial. Get this, listen up, joined USA Financial in February of 2020, right when everything was hitting the fan. And he was out in ground zero, right, out in Washington. And he was able to move over, right as the pandemic started, 100% of his book of business virtually, and he doubled his AUM in 5 months' time. We're going to talk to him. We're going to find out what that ride was like, what he was doing, why it works well. It's going to be really fun. You're going to love spending that time with Kevin. So write that down. We'll get that info to you. But thank you so much for the time. I know we ran a little bit long today. As I almost, I promise there has not been time for questions. So we're going to reach out to you individually. Would love to hear your thoughts about today. Would love to see if you want to take us up on the offer to chat with Mark or Steve. But thank you so much for being here. We always value your time. We always appreciate it. Hope this was a great lunch hour for some of you or for some of you on the West Coast. Thanks for spending your morning with us. We'll see you in May. And thanks again, Mark. Thank you, Steve. It's been enjoyable. And advisors, thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, everybody.